Welcome to Motherhood. I'm Dr. Christina Hibbert, and I'm here to help you overcome, become, and flourish through this unpredictable ride we call motherhood. Today, we are going to be talking about old school parenting for modern day families. And I'm excited to talk about this because, as you guys all know out there, I have 6 kids, 4 of whom are teenagers, and I'm feeling like we need a little old school parenting in our family right now. So I'm excited to introduce our guest to you in just a minute, but first I wanted to share one of my favorite parenting quotes. And I think it kind of sums up what we're going to be talking about today. It's by the poet Khalil Gibran, who wrote this fabulous little book called The Prophet. If you haven't read it, you definitely should. It's fabulous. And part of what he says about parenting, he says, "You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so also he loves the bow that is stable." I love that. I don't know about you guys listening, but I love the idea that I'm the bow and I'm trying to kind of do my best to bend and pull back and get ready to send my kids as the arrows out into the world. And I'm not doing it alone. We've got, the master's hand, so to speak, guiding us and helping us. And today we're going to talk about this kind of this old school idea of being that bow and being strong and firm for our kids and being there for them in a whole different way that we might have forgotten about. So today I want to introduce my fabulous guest, Dr. Michael Moskalow. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Let me introduce you a little bit. So Dr. Moskalow is a professor of psychology at Merrimack College in North Andover, Massachusetts. He did some postdoctoral work at Harvard, and he's written over 100 articles and book chapters. So he's very well educated on all things psychology and parenting and all kinds of different topics. And he's also written 4 different books. And his most recent book is with Norton Publishing. And it's a part of the 8 Keys series, which I am editing my book for the 8 Keys series right now, about to submit that. It's a fabulous series that shares all different 8 keys to whatever topic you want to know about. And Mike's book is 8 Keys to Old School Parenting for Modern Day Families. And I've been reading some of it each night, highlighting and taking notes because I'm really loving the book so far, Mike, and I'm grateful that you're here today with us.
But you have to tell us what your 8 key book is for.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Mine is 8 Keys to Mental Health Through Exercise.
Uh-huh.
So I have been feeling guilty because I haven't exercised very well in a couple weeks because I was in a car accident a few weeks ago and I have whiplash. And so as I'm editing my book, I'm sitting there thinking, I need to get out and go for a jog. So that's one good thing about writing that book is it's making me get out and exercise more because otherwise I'd be a hypocrite, right?
No, not if you have whiplash.
Not if you have whiplash. I know, exactly. So I'm trying to take it easy, but thank you very much. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about your book. And I think this is such a great topic because, parenting, isn't it just one of those topics that it can get people really amped up and polarized and feeling like what's the right way or the wrong way, or people can judge each other. I mean, have you found that too with parenting?
Well, it's like religion and politics, right? These are the things that are hardest to talk about. Everybody has an opinion on parenting. And if you want to say something about parenting, you really risk getting people's ire up. They can very easily get sensitive and offended. And why shouldn't they? I mean, it's so close to what we are and who we are and what we do, our kids.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And I was thinking how, we think about how we were parented or how our parents were parented and how it's changed over time and how people in modern day times are kind of parenting and how it's evolved, I guess. And that's kind of what your book focuses on. So what would you say is the modern day approach compared to the old school approach?
Well, when the country was founded in the late 1700s, parents valued obedience. Mm-hmm. And over time, happily actually, there's been a very steady decline in the value of obedience. And today, we have parents given very low ratings and values on obedience and very high value on autonomy.
Oh,
Parents want their kids to be autonomous, free-thinking, independent, creative. They want them to show initiative. They want them to be active decision makers, able to make their own decisions, all of which are very, very good things.
right.
And so there's really a lot of people today would embrace what I would call the child-centered approach to parenting, child-centered parenting,
Right.
as opposed to adult-centered parenting.
And I
Where
think,
adults, go ahead.
no, go ahead. You continue.
The adult-centered parent is the parent who makes the decisions for the child. Parenting is based upon what the parent wants rather than what the child wants. And many people today feel as though that's not a very good way to raise your children. I actually feel as well that that's not a very good way to raise your children.
Right. Yes.
But the alternative to that has been this child-centered movement, which the idea is that the parenting should be centered around the child. We love our children. We do anything for our children.
Right.
We want to encourage them to be active, inquisitive, creative, and all of that good stuff. And it's based upon the idea that the child is active in his or her own development, and that quite often parents get in the way of their children's own internal active plan. And when that happens, a lot of parents who are in the child-centered mode think that too much parental direction could be hurtful or harmful to a child. And so to borrow a phrase from education, where people talk about student or child-centered education, many people think it is better to think of the parent more as the guide on the side rather than the sage on the stage. So the child is out there discovering the world, learning on his or her own through his or her own activity, making choices, being self-directed. And the parent is a guide on the side rather than the all-knowing sage on the stage.
Right. So I
that's
think
the child-centered movement.
And
it sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds wonderful. I mean, well, who wouldn't want to be centered on your children?
Right. I think so many parents can relate to that because I mean, I've seen that, and I was trying to think about myself, and I know that I have personally, been focused on, am I giving them enough autonomy? Am I respecting them enough? Am I, and I know also the value of being more of an authoritative parent, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I think you're right. I think that people feel like, I think the listeners out there can probably relate to this and feel like, I'm not a good parent if I'm not completely letting the child sort of be the focus of my life. And, as a mother, I talk a lot about that your child shouldn't be the whole focus of your life. There's still a you, there's still a relationship, maybe if you're married or if you have a partner, and none of that can fall by the wayside. But that certainly has become sort of the norm in today's world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Certainly doesn't seem to be anything wrong with wanting your child to be a extremely important part of your life, even the most important part.
Absolutely, I agree.
The problem comes when we want to encourage our children's autonomy and their independence, and we think that there's a contradiction between our authority as parents, our legitimate authority as parents, and our desire to raise autonomous and independent children. Many parents, particularly parents who would endorse this child-centered approach, feel that it's kind of a zero-sum game. Either I have authority over my child, or I can give independence and freedom and autonomy to my child, but I can't do both.
Oh, interesting.
And that's the problem right there. That's the problem right there.
So explain to us what you mean by parental authority.
Well, authority has a bad name these days, but authority is the power to make decisions for somebody else or on behalf of somebody else. And what I'm talking about when I'm talking about parental authority is what I would call legitimate parental authority. Oh. Not all authority is legitimate. And what legitimates a parent's authority is, I think, two things. One, parents know more than their children. In general, typically, about most things, and certainly not about all things. But more importantly, parents are responsible for their children. Parents are responsible for their children's development. And if a parent is responsible for their children's development, they do not simply have the right to have authority over their children. They have a responsibility to do it.
Oh, I like
If
that.
a parent does not seize control over dangerous situations, for example, that parent is behaving irresponsibly. If a parent, out of a well-intentioned desire to foster autonomy or to foster a child's decision-making, allows children to make decisions that they're not ready to make,
Right.
that parent is being irresponsible.
Yeah.
Children come into the world incomplete. They're not little adults. They are not the equals of parents, even though many parents would prefer to think that their children are their equals. They are not.
Right.
And if you allow children to make their own decisions, quite often they will make bad ones. And it is our job to help them make good decisions. And that starts with embracing the idea that as parents, we have legitimate authority. It doesn't mean you tell the kid to do everything, that you're the boss, that you're you're authoritarian, you're a despot. It does mean that you are the one who has an agenda to raise a moral child, a child with values, a child who's able to function in society, and a child can't do that by him or herself.
Right, right. No, this is such an important point that I think a lot of parents out there would think that you might have fallen into that trap. And I think I have felt that way at times. I'm sure we all have, where you do feel like I'm the bad guy if I feel like I have that authority over my children. But I like how you say the legitimate authority and the responsibility part of it is really what stands out to me, because you're right. We do have that responsibility for our kids, and they don't have the same responsibility for us, or they shouldn't anyway. That's right. Wouldn't be healthy if they did, right? And they're not developed. I probably shouldn't say this, but I often tell my children, especially my 4 teenage sons, your brain is not developed until you're 25. So even though you think you're 18 and you're on your own, you still need me. You still need my help.
I teach college.
Yes.
And I teach students who are 18 to 22. And I have no problem saying to them, you may feel as though you're a fully cooked adult right now, but you're still cooking.
You're still cooking.
And
I like that.
You still need guidance, and I'm here to provide it for you.
That's good. So let's talk about these. We've thrown around a couple of words here: authoritative, authoritarian, and as a psychology student in graduate school, I learned these are 3 parenting styles. Those are 2 of the 3 parenting styles, and I think most of the people, if you've taken a child development class, if you've taken a lot of parenting classes, if you've taken psychology, you might have come across these. But I would say most parents probably have never really even heard of these. So will you explain to us the 3 parenting styles and how they differ, and especially that authoritative versus authoritarian? They just sound so much alike, and I think people can get confused.
Yeah. So Diana Baumrind in the 1960s did this classic work where she was looking at different types of parenting styles. And in her work, she came up with 3 primary types of parenting styles. There's more that she came up with than the 3, but 3 are the basic ones. Okay. Incidentally, she's still writing. I think she's in her 90s.
Oh,
and she just
fabulous.
wrote an article. There's a new book out on authoritative parenting that she is part of. So the three basic parenting styles, you can think of them as in terms of 2 basic dimensions, 2 basic ways of thinking about parenting. One is how demanding the parent is, and the 2 is how warm, nurturant, communicative the parent is. So you've got demandingness on the one hand and warmth and nurturance on the other. Okay. Now, people tend to think that these are either or. Either you're demanding or you're nurturant and warm, but you can't be both at the same time. And that's the problem. That's the problem right there. The trick is to see that you can and should be both at the same time.
Yeah, let me interrupt you just right there, because I think that's a really good point. I really do. I agree with that people think that either or. I remember in graduate school learning, you shouldn't say, this or that. You should say this and that, when you've got 2 good things. But it's like that, to use a psychology term, that cognitive dissonance, which means, when we have one thing that our brain believes and then there's another conflicting belief, we tend to try to settle on one. But that the truth is, often we do have things that seem contradictory, but they are both valid and helpful and good. Correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yes, indeed. So if you think about the 3 parenting styles, building on what you just said, the authoritarian parenting style, this is the style where the parent sees him or herself as the boss, I'm in charge, it's my way or the highway, that sort of thing. These are parents who have high expectations. That is to say, they're highly demanding. They have high maturity demands, high demands for what they believe children should do and be.
Right.
But they have rather low. They're not very warm, not very communicative, not very nurturing. Right. They expect the child to obey what they say, but they don't necessarily help the child to find out why that's important, why that's a good thing. So it's a one-way thing. I set the agenda and you follow it.
So can you give us an example?
There's some millions and millions of examples.
I'm sure people can think of an example, but it might help people out there listening to picture it.
You want to go to school, and you don't want to wear your raincoat. Says your young teenager, and mom or dad says you're going to wear that raincoat no matter what happens. I'm the father, you're the kid. Go wear that raincoat. Right. It's homework time. You're saying to me that you're tired and you just got home and you want a break. Well, no, we do our homework right at the end of the day, and there's no questions being asked. So gotcha. I set the agenda. There's a rigidity about it, and quite often an authoritarian parent, if the child disobeys, we get into punishment. Yes. There's a punishment or some type of reaction like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
And this is not a particularly helpful way of parenting. It does not produce children who are socially competent, intellectually competent, who have a secure sense of self. There are problems with it.
Yes.
And the same can be said. The permissive parent. So you have authoritarian on one hand. The permissive parent is the exact opposite of the authoritarian parent. Okay. The permissive parent, which is much closer to child-centered parenting. The permissive parent is one who loves her child, who believes that that children have kind of an internal plan. It's like children are like budding flowers. All they really need, they have an inner plan. If you just give them enough love and sunshine and warmth, that they will develop according to their inner desires and that sort of thing. And if you're too direct, you can derail them. So that the permissive parent is very warm, very nurturing, very communicative, but does not have high maturity demands. This is not very demanding. Does not say, okay, here's the goals, the standards that I want you to attain, but doesn't say that, but instead believes that just a lot of warmth and love is gonna do the trick.
So I like that word. So, let's explain that a little bit more. Maturity demands. I think you kind of explained it a little bit, but I want to point that out for the listeners that's really an important part. That we like the nurturing, the loving part of the permissive style. That's a great part of it. But it's sort of not expecting much out of the child. I mean, can you explain that a little bit?
Yes. What is it? What do I take to be an example of mature behavior from you? If you are in the store and we're in the checkout line, and you're a 7-year-old child, and you ask for candy, and I say no candy now. We're going to wait until after dinner time. And the child begins to nag and say, I want more candy. I want candy. I really want the candy. Give me candy. That is an example of, at least for me, as a violation of maturity demand. You're not acting in a way that is fitting your age. You're not showing self-control. You're not showing respect for other people. For me, you're not. You're being demanding and all the rest of it. So you're not living up to the expectations that I have for you for what would constitute a mature person at the age of 7.
At the age of 7.
Your level
right.
At the age of 7.
Everybody can relate to this example because we've all been in the store and had our own kids crying for candy or whatever, and you don't know what to do, you don't know how to behave, and you think, oh my gosh, everybody's watching me because my kid's acting crazy. And it's funny because I remember, and this is probably more of an example of what you're about to share, the authoritative style, but I remember as one of my first jobs, I was a parent aide. So I worked with Child Protective Services, and my job was to work with the parents who'd abused their children and to teach them parenting skills to see if we could reunite them with their children, because as I'm sure you would agree, a lot of parents who end up hurting their children, they just really do lack the skills needed to be able to cope because it's really tough. Yes, true. So, but anyway, we were watching this video as a sort of a training video. And I still remember it. It's been, I don't know, like almost 20 years probably, but there was this mom in the store with her child who was probably like a toddler age who wanted the candy and was crying. And at first they showed the permissive style of the mom, that same mom with the baby, not the baby, the toddler kind of crying and acting out, and the mom sort of placating the child like, well, stop crying, here, take the candy. No, here, take some more, and kind of more focused on how people were perceiving her or what the child needed versus good parenting in that moment, right? Which we can all relate to. But then the second example was the same mom, and she was with the same situation. The child was crying, and she first said no to the child in a loving way, a firm, loving no, no. And then when the child started crying some more, no, I already told you no, and I'm not going to listen to you if you're going to act like this. And then she just goes through the line, and she starts communicating with the other adult at the checkout, and how are you doing? How's your day going? And just the child is screaming and crying, it's a 2-year-old or whatever, and the mom's just ignoring it. And I had a toddler at that time, and I thought, oh, that is fabulous parenting. I wish I could do that and not care and just carry on a conversation with the woman at the checkout counter, because the woman at the checkout counter was then sort of like, okay, I guess I'll ignore it too, And I think now when I see parents that do that kind of stuff, I'm sort of giving them the thumbs up, like, good job, way to hang in there, way to be tough, right?
That's a beautiful, beautiful example, those two descriptions. And I think there's a lot of people who would look at that parent doing what you just described and say, boy, that's a mean parent.
I know. I agree.
And we love our kids. We don't want them to feel bad. And part of loving the child, if the child wants something, we want them to have it. And this is part of the impulse that, giving the child the candy in the checkout counter, and then once the kid has it, there's this pleading tone. Since I have, you said pleading, it's wonderful. Since I don't have high maturity demands for you and I want to love you, if I want something from you, I don't have any way of getting it. I have to plead with you. The child gets the upper hand here. Right. And this is a problem. Right. This is a problem.
It's a big problem.
And what you're describing...
The part that I think you were referring to is that I wanted to kind of comment on is, you're right. I think there are a lot of people that still judge others for this, and they do think it's mean. And that's why I kind of like to give the thumbs up and, hey, you're doing a good job, because I think we do feel like I'm doing something wrong. But isn't it more, it's like you're willing to sacrifice pleasing your child in the moment, or like you say, the child kind of becomes the one in control here, pleasing your child in the moment for what you really want them to learn long term. And it's kind of about going back to that. What do I really want? Like you say, I have standards. I have expectations. I want them to be this kind of person long term. So in the short term, it means I'm going to have to say no and mean it, right?
That's right. What you just said made me think of something. When many parents, when the child is asking for that candy or doing something similar, there are many reasons for giving in to the child. One is because what we've said, we don't want the child to feel bad. Other people are watching me. There's another one too, and it's kind of strange if you think about it, is that parents want to respect their children. They want to respect their children's wishes. They want to give their children some decision making. Right. And if I'm child-centered, I actually, in a sense, put my respect for the child higher than the child's respect for me. And so when I give the child that candy out of a respect or some such thing, or if I allow the child to make a decision to go to bed a little bit later when they really shouldn't be, out of some sense of respect, what I'm doing is I'm indulging that child instead of. And what I'm doing is I'm teaching that child that their needs trump everybody else's needs. That I have to respect their needs, but they don't have to respect mine. They don't have to respect my prerogative. And this is a formula for raising narcissistic, self-focused children. Children in the past were called brats. Yes. But that's politically incorrect to say these days. That's a formula for raising self-focused, entitled children. Right. The authoritative parent is the one who resolves the paradox, who understands that high demands do not come at the expense of love and nurturance, and that you need both. You need both. So that in that checkout count, you described it beautifully. No, honey, we can't have candy right now because it's going to ruin your dinner. I see that you're crying. I'm not going to talk to you. Do you see all these people? They see that you're crying, and you're just going to have to cry and see what they say. But that's it. If the kid throws a temperature tantrum, you put your stuff down, you pick the kid up, you take them outside, you create a safe space, you let them have their tantrum. Then when you're done, you come up to them and explain what the rule is that they violated. The rule that you violated is when we're in a public place and you ask a question like this, and I say to wait, you're going to need to show respect. If you're hungry, tell me that you're hungry, and we'll try to figure out a way to get you to have something to eat that's not going to spoil your dinner. Yeah, if you're hungry, I don't want you not to be hungry. Right. I want to help you. Right. I'm on your side. But not if we're going to act in ways that are disrespectful and out of control.
Yes, exactly. So let's just make it clear for everybody listening one more time about this authoritative parenting style, because it really is the best of both worlds in a sense, right? It involves the loving, like you said, the loving warmth, but also the demand is probably, it sounds more mean, but you have expectations, you have hopes for your children,
right.
you
right.
Morals,
demandingness.
Values, demandingness. Okay.
Right. Yes, the authoritative parent is both demanding and loving. The authoritarian parenting is demanding without being loving and nurturant, and the permissive parent is loving and nurturant without being very demanding.
Right.
But you recoiled a little bit when you said the word demanding.
I know, I did it, didn't I?
A lot of us do.
It
sounds mean.
It sounds mean because I'm being demanding of my child. I'm being harsh and punitive, but it doesn't mean that really.
Let's bring the child to school. Would we want a teacher who wasn't demanding?
Right.
Yes. To be demanding is to have high expectations, and that's not a bad thing. That's the only way children develop. They've got to rise to the occasion. But the trick is we're not going to allow them to rise to the occasion alone. We're going to help them. When we have a high expectation, we're going to go, all right, kid, I want you to clean your room. Okay. Cleaning the room is overwhelming. Let's do it together. Okay, we're not going to quit. Now take those over there in the corner and put them on this shelf. Okay, you done with that? Okay, and then after we do that a few times, you turn a bit more of the responsibility for cleaning of the room over to the child, then a bit more, then sooner or later, child's doing it all by him or herself.
Right.
And then all you do have to say is go clean your room, and it's done.
Well, it's kind of this idea of expecting and teaching our children as well. It's that's what I loved about your example earlier of, you showed what happens after that mom I remembered from the video left the store and how she did handle it. In the moment she was just trying to get through the line and not get herself worked up and not cause more trouble. But then she goes and she explains and she helps the child, like you say, label and identify their emotions, which is very important for younger children especially, and for I think children and people of all ages. I mean, sometimes I need help identifying my emotions. And you're right. That you show that really we're teaching our children, we're modeling for them, we're being the example in a sense in this authoritative style.
Parents are their children's first and most important teachers throughout.
Yes,
and I believe that is true even during school, even through school.
I agree with that completely. And, I have to share this excerpt from your book because this is the part that I loved, and it's right at the beginning. And as I said, I have, teenagers. And one thing I was thinking about as I was kind of preparing to talk with you today, Mike, I was thinking about how when our kids are young, it might seem, it does seem more harsh or punitive when we're sort of being on their case. But I'm telling you, as soon as you get a teenager in the house, suddenly you're going, wait a minute, I don't want them to have choices anymore. I don't want to give them a bunch of freedom. I don't want to, I want them to listen to me and to obey me. And so as I was reading this, I literally am planning to sit down and read this to my teenagers because I feel like this is a perfect, for me, it's a perfect style of parenting. And this is kind of what you mean by old school parenting. So I'm going to read this from your book. So this is from page 3 of 8 Keys to Old School Parenting for Modern Day Families. And so it says, I am your parent. I'm not your friend, your playmate, your maid, or your chauffeur. You are not my equal. I am responsible for your safety and development. I am here to teach you how to be successful in this world. Why is this? Well, for one thing, I brought you into the world, or I at least chose to bring you into my world. For another, I love you and don't want anything bad to happen to you. But most important, it's because right now, and for the most important things, I know more than you do. And this is the part that really stood out because I've got particularly one son who's around the age of 18 who thinks because he's 18, he suddenly knows enough. And he's like, I'm sick of people telling me that they know more than I do, or that adults still know more than I do. And I was like, well, they do. So when I read that, I really liked that. So maybe I'm just trying to like feed my own ego here a little bit and say, see, it's not just me that says it. It's in the book. So to continue, I know things that you need to know to be successful in the world. And yes, I have a better understanding of what's good for you than you do. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm all-knowing and that I'm not going to make mistakes. I am not all-knowing. I am going to make mistakes, but when I do, they will be honest mistakes. Mistakes I've made because I did what I thought was right for you in the moment. So no, I'm not perfect. Over time, I'm going to learn a lot from you about how to parent you. Over time, as you learn to be more and more successful in the world, I'm going to turn over more and more responsibility to you for doing things yourself and for doing things right. That's what growing up means. However, know this, and I love this part. If you fail to do the right thing, you're going to find me right there, showing you the way until you can get it right. So you see, even though it might not always seem to be so to you, I'm on your side. You are my son or daughter, and you're stuck with me. You're not going to get rid of me. I'm here to help you get what you want out of life, but to help you do it in the right way. If it turns out that you want the wrong things, I'm here to help you turn the wrong things into right things. Why? Because I am your parent. I'm not your friend, your playmate, your maid, or your chauffeur. That's beautiful. I love that.
I'm happy. Thank you so much. Thank you so
That's
much.
That's kind of the idea, isn't it, of old school parenting, that paragraph.
Yes. But note it says old school parenting for modern day families.
Right. So tell us about that.
There's the important thing here is, we don't want to equate. I think that not everything we don't want to glorify the past. We don't want to say that everything that was going on in the old school is better.
Right.
In every new epoch, something is getting better and something is getting worse. Something is lost, something is gained, and much has been gained. I mean, we have civil rights, we have women's rights, we have gay and lesbian rights. We have a lot of important and good things that have come out of the progressive movement. But we also have some not so good things, and one of the biggest things is this idea that we are all individuals unto ourselves. We are free to choose for ourselves and choose our own ways of being, our own morality, for example. And if we choose our own morality, there is no morality at all. Because we can't be moral all by ourselves. Morality is about relating to you. It's about community values. It's about civic values. It's about my virtue. What does it mean to be a good person?
Oh, yes.
So
I am so with you on that one. I'm so with you on that one. I think that morality is almost like a bad word or something, just, you're not supposed to have moral values. And you're right. How are our kids supposed to find the way? At least, I mean, I'm sure you probably I feel like my parents instilled values in me, and that was really important. And, it's important to me as a parent to teach my children that. In fact, I feel like it's one of my most important jobs is to teach them and model for them as well, because we can't just teach them and if we're not doing it ourselves. But yeah, I so agree that is one negative of today's world. And your book kind of focuses on teaching children values as a way to motivate them, correct? I mean, and what are some of the negative ways that kids are motivated nowadays if they don't have values?
Well, it's funny. I think you're absolutely right. I think that values are a dirty word. Morality is a dirty word.
Yeah.
How many times have you heard parents say, or even ourselves say,
right,
that's not okay? What a mealy-mouthed way of saying something. Rather than saying that's bad. That's wrong. We're so afraid to impose our morality on other people or to say that this is better than that, that something bad has been reduced to it's inappropriate or it's not okay.
You're
This
right.
is our squeamishness about values, and this comes from a really good place, though. It comes from the desire to respect other people.
Right.
It comes from the desire to respect other cultures and the desire not to impose ourselves onto other people. Those are good things.
They are.
The problem is that it's this either-orism again. It's either or. Either I respect you, or I'm giving myself up. Or I either respect you or I'm imposing upon you. No. I can respect another culture's beliefs even while I disagree with them.
Absolutely.
And I can make an argument for why I think it shouldn't be that way. We should not shy away from moral issues. We have to confront them head on.
Right.
We can't be arrogant about them. We don't know everything. But we can't just say everything is okay. Whatever everybody else does is okay, because it's not. Not all things are okay. And until we take back some notion of values, identifying ourselves in terms of values, we're going to have problems.
Right. And it's good to respect other people. Of course, that's something we want to do, but also we need that self-respect of standing up for the things that we believe are right and good and true, and putting that out into the world, because we need more of that goodness in the world. Whatever your version of goodness is, you need that in the world.
There's many versions.
Right.
There's many versions of goodness that we can embrace. There's not just one.
And then we model that and we teach that to our children, and then hopefully they want to develop some of those things we do. So, I mean, what are some of the things that you talk about in your book, or that you believe are helpful in helping our children kind of navigate this world of morality isn't so good, or it's sort of, uncool to be moral?
Let me answer that by addressing the question that you asked a few minutes ago that I didn't answer.
Yes, please.
We'll do both at the same time.
Great.
And you had asked about motivating children.
Yes.
About how do you motivate children with values.
Yes.
When we think about motivating children in the United States, I think that we have put ourselves in a terrible, terrible bind. Because we think of our children as little adults or little individuals who are free to make their own choices. And if we suggest otherwise or are directive with our children, we're squelching their capacity to make choices, that we're oppressing them for some reason. Because we have that kind of a mindset, we divide motivation into two sources: intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, inner motivation and outer motivation. And the best example of this is, I think of, is reading. Parents want their kids to love reading.
Right.
They want to have, they want their children to develop a love of reading. And the idea is, well, how am I going to do that? If I tell my child to read, if I direct my child to read, they're going to be reading books that they don't want to read, and they're going to stop loving reading, and they'll never read again. That's external motivation. If I give my children books and I reward them for giving them money for reading books, well, they're reading the books for the wrong reasons.
Yes.
So that says we want inner motivation. We want our children to be able to read because of their natural love of reading. So it's best to kind of leave the kid alone and just leave the books out. Well, what happens? Well, a small proportion of kids will grasp those books and read them like mad, but most kids probably won't. They'll leave the books there and they never develop the internal motivation. So what have you got? If you leave it to the kid's inner motivation, most kids aren't going to develop whatever it is that's difficult and beyond their comfort zone.
Right.
And if you leave it to external motivation, they're doing it for the wrong reasons. What are you going to do? The answer is to reject both inner and external motivation. Now, this is going to be maybe a little bit hard to understand, but it's kind of the same thing as rejecting either authoritarian or permissive parenting.
Okay.
Motivation neither comes from outside or inside.
Right, and that's another either or again. We're trying to kind of reject a lot of either ors today. Okay, yes. So
it comes from between. It comes from between. It
yes.
comes from reading as a family. It comes from saying, we value reading in this family. Let's spend some time together in this. We'll spend an hour a night instead of watching TV reading, if that's what we do. And we'll read to each other. And I'll help you to read to me. And we'll pick some books that you like, and we'll pick some books that I like. And I'll challenge you, and I'll support you as you learn to read something. And it's only after we get good at something. It's only after struggle. We don't love playing the piano right from the start. It gets hard. It's only when we get good at the piano that we start to enjoy it.
Okay,
when we begin to say, I am now a piano player.
That's right, because you made a really important point. It's the struggle. The struggle is what not only makes us good and makes us grow, but it's we kind of have to go through that in order to really, like you say, learn to love something or internalize it or make it part of us or make it part of our values, something that's important to us.
I love that phrase you just said, to learn to love something. Learn to love something.
Yes.
Plato said that the job of education is to teach children the right things to love.
Oh, I love that.
We hear so often, oh, I can't make my child care. You can lead a horse to water. You can't make the child drink. That's nonsense.
Yes.
We're in the business of making children care. That's what we do.
Right.
We say, care about this. Don't care about that.
That's
when it comes
true.
to food,
That's true.
we have to learn to like foods we don't like. We can't give kids chicken nuggets all the time and macaroni and cheese, or else they'll never learn to. No, rather than saying I don't like that food, it's better to say, well, I haven't learned to like that food yet. Okay, I get it, kid. You don't like that food? Fine. Take a little bit. A no thank you portion. We'll give you a little bit more the next time, and you'll learn to like it. That's how they do it in India, where the young kids are eating spicy foods all the time.
I know. That's so funny because I hated so many things as a child, and my parents really didn't make me try new foods. And I didn't realize till I was an adult how little, I guess, adventure my parents have in eating. They hardly like any kinds of foods, and so I really wasn't exposed to a lot. So as an adult,
Are they going to watch this?
Well, I don't know. They know it's true. They know it's true. But I did as an adult. I had to learn to like yogurt. I thought I didn't like it. I thought I didn't like bean burritos. I thought I didn't like shrimp or any kind of seafood. And vegetables, forget it. I didn't really like most of them. So I would eat only the ones that, my parents could get us to eat. But as an adult, I realized, yeah, you do. You can learn to like a lot of things. And especially when you have a good reason to learn to like them, like it's going to make you healthier. It's something that that you want to be able to eat with your friends or your family or whatever. There is a learn to like principle. And I think that's a really important thing for parents out there listening to apply. And I loved what you said about, we're exposing them, we're showing them what, like this and don't like that. I mean, I've never thought about it that way, but it's so true.
It's what we do. It's what we don't know we're doing it quite often, but we do.
Yes.
What was I going to say? Oh, yes. There's many places where children come by this idea that I need to learn to like something, sometimes quite naturally. Teenagers, why are they drinking that beer? The first time they drink a beer or smoke a cigarette, those are not so pleasant experiences. So why do they continue?
Right.
Well, they continue because they see some value associated. It's going to make me cool. It's going to make me an adult. Mm-hmm. It's going to make me somehow part of some valued way of being. Yeah. Not very good ways of thinking about those two things, but
typical.
But they do persevere through that. Another very good example is sports. Children, adolescents will go through all types of pain. And they don't expect their coach to say, you're not feeling so well today. You don't have to work out today, or such thing. Instead, it's no pain, no gain. And children are willing. The teens are willing to endure all types of hardship to get that sense of being an athlete, the adulation, the social adulation that comes from that sort of an identity.
That's true.
And that's
they'll
what
even respect their coaches.
Say.
They'll listen to their coach. They'll respect their coach. They'll do whatever their coach says. But when the parent tries to do the same thing, somehow it's not the same. But I think a lot of it is the coach has those expectations and the child has the motivation there that they want that thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
So becomes, how do we get our children to want the right things? How do we get our children to want the right things?
That's a really good
question. And if
question.
you think about it, I mean, this is probably one of the most important things that I believe about child development and about people in general.
Uh-huh.
We tend to think that if we want to motivate somebody, we have to either use inner motivation or outer motivation, whether we give them rewards, punishment, praise, or we have to let it come from within. But neither of those things is really true. The most profound and important motives that we have are the motives that come from when we identify with some system of social values. When we say, this is good, and I want to be good in that way, there's nothing that can stop us. A mother will do anything to defend her child. Out of love for the child and out of her sense of commitment to what it means to be a good mother. People die on hunger strikes for purposes. Gandhi went on hunger strikes and wouldn't stop going on a hunger strike until violence ended. Soldiers will throw themselves on a grenade for their comrades. And I'm not suggesting that our children throw themselves on grenades, but I am saying that once we identify ourselves, once we want to see ourselves in some image, we will do anything to make that happen. And that's a big lesson for parents. Child, who are you? Who do you want to be? Who should you be? If you choose that route, people will think that of you. If you choose another route, people will choose something different. Who do you want to be? How do you want to see yourself?
I love that.
Once children identify with that, there's no stopping them.
I love that. You're right. Because how many of us parents out there listening have taken the time to really ask that? I'm sure we've thought about it ourselves, who we hope they become. I know I've thought about that a lot of times with all my kids. And are they on track to become who I hope they become? But, really instilling in them, who do you want to be? It's kind of like Viktor Frankl's idea from his wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning, one of my favorites, that, he who has a why to live for can bear with almost any how. So if you know who you want to become and why you should listen to your parents' guidance and wisdom or respect your parents, then as a child, I think you're much more likely then to bear the how of what you have to live with your parents in order to get to be that person you want to be.
Indeed. Now, here's an antiquated example. It starts very, very early. It starts very, very early. Now, this example may make some people feel uncomfortable, but it's a ubiquitous example. It's an example of gender identity. At 3, 5, 6, 7 years of age, children come to identify themselves, most children, as a boy or a girl.
Right.
Well, those are valued categories. Ask a 5-year-old boy to put on a dress. And that boy ain't going to want to do it if he or she identifies as a boy.
Right.
Now, what does that mean? That means once I identify myself with the value of being boy or girl, I am committed to that, and I will do anything to maintain and extend that idea. So that identity begins to develop very, very early on.
That's very
true. And we used to have the notion, and we don't need it now, be a gentleman, all right? Well, a child who identified with being a gentleman, that was a social category. Now, we don't need to have that one if you don't want to have that one, if we feel as though it's sexist. But be a good friend? What does it mean to be a good friend?
Absolutely.
We socialize, again, with child-centeredness. If the individual child's needs, preferences, happiness is at the center.
Yes.
What we end up doing is we end up getting up in the morning and asking, what will make me happy today? My life is all about what will make me happy.
Yeah, you're right.
What would it be like if we asked our children to ask, what can I do today to become a more perfect person? What can I do today to be a better person? What can I do today to contribute to the world?
Right.
What can I do today to contribute to someone else's happiness? That would be defining myself in terms of my values. And it's very different from what will make me happy, which is mostly what we have today.
Right.
We encourage people to be whoever they can be for themselves. We don't encourage people to try to define what it means to be a good self, a good person, and to go out there and be a good person, be your best self, and cultivate that slowly over time. That's what I want to see
Yeah, that's
in our
great.
in our nation.
That's great. And what I'm thinking as you're saying this is, when you said go be a good person or contribute, those are things that personally for me are values of mine. And, it made me kind of go, okay, how much do my kids know that those are my values? Do they see me acting in that way? Do they hear me saying those things? Am I as a parent sharing that? And, for those listening out there, ask yourself that question. Just, have I shared my values with my kids? Have I point blank told them, it's really important to me that I contribute, and I want to take you with me to go volunteer because I think that's a really important value. And, we need to tell them probably a million times as they grow up so that they really get it. One of the most important values I know I've said to my kids a bunch of times is honesty, because I always say, I think there's a quote by Abraham Lincoln or something that all the other values kind of based on honesty. If you're not honest and truthful, no one can trust you and you can't really do any of the other values. So, in our house, that's an important value. And that's when I know that I've shared a lot. But I think we can all ask ourselves, how much am I sharing these things with my kids, and in what ways am I inspiring them to want to develop their own values for themselves? Now, I think part of this too, and this is, I definitely want us to talk about this because this is such an important topic, discipline versus punishment. I think when we think about self-discipline, what we're talking about right now requires a lot of self-discipline, and that's probably something we want to teach our kids. But when we talk about punishment versus discipline with kids, I bet you get this all the time. I've taught parenting classes for years, and everybody wants to know, how do I discipline my kids? What do I need to do to stop them from X, Y, or Z behavior? And they want that the very first class. And when I teach, I always wait till the end anyway, so it's fitting we're talking about this at the end, because I think you can't really do a good job disciplining your kids or punishing. You're going to share a little bit about the difference between the two, but how discipline works better when we are self-disciplined as parents. When we're in control of ourselves, when we know what we're trying to teach them, what we're trying to engage in with them, we are doing a much better job of disciplining our kids versus just acting out of anger or being
that's
frustrated.
Wonderful. It's a great reason to save it till last. That's great.
Yeah, so share a little bit about punishment and why it doesn't work, and discipline. We've only got a few more minutes, but I think this is really important.
Gracious me. Okay, punishment and discipline.
Yeah.
Punishment and discipline are not the same thing.
Right.
Punishment and consequences are not the same thing. Although punishment is a type of consequence, punishment and what I would call meaningful consequences are not the same thing. Punishment has a technical meaning. What it means is when I punish someone, I am giving them some painful something, some painful stimulus, some painful event that in response to something that they have done that I don't like.
Right.
So the child refuses to eat his peas, and so I send him to his room, or I tell him I ground him, or if I'm a punitive parent physically, I slap the kid's hand or some such thing. The theory behind it is that if I can get the child to associate something painful with what he or she has done, the child will think again next time and not do it.
So what is discipline in contrast?
It's very simple. I'm going to give you a very simple example. The child comes in and says, milk. I want milk.
Yes.
Well, yes, my dear, I see that you want milk, but that's not the way to say it. That's not the way to say it.
Right.
You can have milk when you ask me in a polite way. Now, what just happened? The child said, I want milk. And there was a consequence of the child's action. There was a meaningful consequence. The meaningful consequence were many, actually. One is the child didn't get milk.
Yes.
The child asked for milk, didn't get milk.
That's good.
In fact, so if you're going to ask rudely, you don't get milk. Period.
That's
Done.
that authoritative style in action right there. Yes.
That's authoritative style. But if you say to me, Mommy, may I please have some milk? I'm putty in your hands. Here's the milk. There you go, my love. There you have it. So That simple paradigm, that simple idea can be used for virtually anything. That when children do something, there must be consequences.
Right.
But those consequences must be meaningful to the child's interests, to the child's own interests. A punishment is something that is tangential to the child's interests. And this is hard to explain. I understand that it is. But a consequence is something that is related to the child's interest. So the child goes out and takes the car and comes home a half an hour late. Well, it's pretty simple. You had a privilege to take the car. Now you don't get to take the car until you show me that you can be responsible with it.
Right. It's
logical. I'm not going to eat dinner. Excuse me?
No, it's illogical. It's tied to what he did, and it's...
I prefer the term. Yes, it's a logical, meaningful consequence.
Meaningful. I like that word, meaningful. And it means something to him because he wants the car and you can't have it now.
Exactly.
Right. And the other kids might not care about the car, so you have to use a whole different approach.
That's why logical is not as good, in my opinion, as meaningful.
Yeah,
you got to make it meaningful to the child.
I like
that. You got to make it meaningful to what the child wants.
And having 6 children, I can tell you for sure, and everybody out there listening can relate, if you have more than one child, you are going to have a bunch of different kinds of consequences for your children, because it doesn't always work. We had one child who got in tons of trouble as a teenager a few years ago. And I mean, we went through every idea we had until we found something that really did matter to him. He just didn't care. He didn't care about being grounded. He didn't care about having things taken away from him, So it really is.
All those things are punishments. Having something taken away from him is a punishment, or the grounding is a punishment. Those are punishments. And the consequence comes right from could you give me the example? Tell me what worked in that situation that you're describing about with
what ended up working, it's interesting because it was, in my mind, it was a consequence, because we had told him if he didn't do X, Y, or Z, to be more truthful. He had been working on honesty and lying and things. And if he didn't do what we had asked him to do by a certain date, then he wasn't going to be able to participate in a play that he wanted to be in. And that's what worked. And he ended up not doing it. And we ended up pulling him from the play. And it was just like, sorry, that's the consequence. We told you that's what it was. And he knew ahead of time, and we talked to him about it, and we did it in a loving way. But boy, that worked. Unfortunately, it was sad, but it worked. Yeah. That is a very, very important, the way I would still define that as a punishment, according to I guess so.
My thinking. But nonetheless, it's very effective. In the book, I talk about something that is a last resort type of a thing.
Yeah.
A last resort type.
This was.
It's very similar to what you just said.
Yes.
Again, I don't believe in punishment in any circumstance, but I do believe in what I call get out of your personal hell. Get out of your personal hell.
Yes.
This is when, for young kids, when, you've asked them to do something, they don't do it. It's very simple, actually. It's totally simple. So the child won't come to dinner when you ask. Come to dinner. No, I'm not going to keep playing. No, come to dinner. Come on. Oh, then you start pleading with the kid, permissive if you want. Oh, it's good. We'll give you some nice dessert if you come. If you come, we'll get nonsense. You don't need to do any of that. What you do is you pick the kid up and you put him on the steps, if that's the kid's personal hell. And you say, okay, you're going to sit here until you agree to come to the table.
Yes.
End. No discussion. You do that 2 or 3 times, and the kid will be will come immediately when they're called, because the pain of sitting on the steps is so terrible. They don't want that so much that they'll do anything to escape that.
Right.
Now that's the method of last resort, I say.
Yes.
It's the most effective thing. It's not the first thing. The first thing is, I would suggest, is to do a 5-step scenario. Do we have enough time for me to say?
If you can just name them off real quick, then we can name them off and we'll kind of end on this.
I don't know if I remember them. I don't know if I remember them.
Because these are good ideas for people.
First, you acknowledge the child's feeling, the child's interest.
Okay.
I know that you don't want to come to dinner. You want to keep playing.
Okay.
You stop the unwanted behavior. That's 2. If the kid's running away, you stop him and you look at him in the eye and make sure he's not running away. You state what the kid did wrong. 3. You didn't come to the table when we asked you to. That's 3. 4, you provide an alternative response. In this case, instead of sitting on the steps, you're going to come and eat with us.
Right.
And the 5th one is to I can't remember the 5th one. So
you sound like me. I forget all the time. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a blog post about our discussion today and put it on my website at drchristinahibbert.com, because there's been such great information, and I'd like to be able to maybe use some quotes from your book to explain a little bit more about discipline versus punishment and help people understand some tools. And I will be sure to put the 5 ideas for how to
you're wonderful.
help your children
Thank you.
with better discipline, because I do think it's a hard topic. It's a tough one. Even as you're talking, I'm thinking, oh yeah, I guess I was punishing my kids instead of disciplining. But when I think about discipline, really to me it boils down to you're trying to teach them something, really.
Yes.
Instead of just punishing them, you're trying to teach them something. And so that's a good question.
It's what you
I think.
said before when you spoke about self-discipline.
Yes,
someone who is self-disciplined has learned and internalized something and can control myself.
Right.
That's what it is.
Absolutely.
Lovely.
Well, I'm so grateful that you were here today, Mike. It's been so great talking to you. You have so much information, and your book is fabulous. We didn't even really go through the 8 keys, although we did touch on some of them. But I hope everybody out there will go and grab a copy of 8 Keys to Old School Parenting for Modern Day Families. You can find it on Norton Publishing website, but also on Amazon.com and probably other booksellers. I'm guessing Barnes & Noble and all those. That's probably there too. So go check that out, and be sure to check out Mike's blog. He just started a blog on psychology today, and if you look up the 8 keys, or is the 8 keys or just old school parenting?
If you just put old school parenting, you'll find it.
Okay, so go to psychologytoday.com and you can look up old school parenting. You can find his blog and follow that. And he also does relationship and parent coaching, so you can check out his website at connectlifecoaching.com. Thank you so much for being here today. And as I said, it's been great talking to you. And as I said, I will put that blog post up. It will be posted the same week that the interview is posted for the first time. And in the meantime, I hope that everybody out there takes what we talked about today, go back and listen to it again. We talked about a lot of things that are really kind of deep and might take a little while to really put into our own lives. And I ask you to go back and listen to it and kind of reflect on your own life and how you can apply these things to help you become the kind of parent that you want to be and raise kids that become the kind of kids they want to be, as we talked about today. And until then, I hope you will join me here every week as we figure out how to not just go through parenting, but how to grow through parenting here on Motherhood. And in the meantime, go check out my books, This Is How We Grow and Who Am I Without You, on Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. And also be sure to visit my website at drchristinahibbert.com for more tools and information on this topic. Until next week, bye-bye, everybody.